Pragnananda recently crossed 2700 and is playing at the Geza Hetenyi Memorial in Budapest. Now we are following this tournament very closely, and in round 4 he won his game. I recorded a video but my sound wasn't there. So okay, that was fine. In round 5 he lost his game to Amin Tabatabai, who played really well and then joined Prag in the lead with 4 out of 5. And now this is round 6. And generally, when you have lost a game, you are a little bit circumspect. You feel like, okay, my tournament was going well. Suddenly, I lost a game. So, how would Pragnananda react to this loss? He's playing with the black pieces against Peter Prohaska. He's a strong Hungarian grandmaster. And let's go to this game. He's a very positional player. I've played with him before and very strong positionally. So let's see how Prag deals with him. And in fact, this game is a very, very good example of how one should deal with the imbalance of a queen versus two rooks. Okay, let's begin. D4 by Peter, knight f6 by Pragnananda, c4, e6, knight c3, bishop b4. We have the Nimzo Indian defense, e3, the Rubinstein variation, castles, bishop d2. Now this line is getting very popular these days with the white pieces, but Prag's reaction is very classical. He hits the center, d5, knight f3, and now decides to do something about his bishop on c8 and plays his pawn up to b6. C takes d5 and the pawn recaptures back. Bishop goes to d3, and now this is a kind of opening subtlety. He goes back bishop d6. You may ask, like, why not bishop b7, or for that matter bishop a6, because that's also playable after takes. But I think the most accurate move order is bishop d6, and this has been played before. In fact, it is also the top engine choice. He castles, and now Prag goes rook e8. This controls the e5 square, and also when knight comes to b5, you want to drop the bishop back to f8. Okay, knight comes to b5, Prag drops it back, knight jumps to e5, bishop a6, and now the threat is c6, and then your bishop would be hanging. So he goes back, bishop e1, c6, knight goes back, trades, queen takes. And now, black has a small problem here, which is that he wants to play knight d7, which is the most natural move to develop his knight. But unfortunately, his c6 pawn is soft. So what do? He first goes queen c8. Very nice little move. He defends this pawn. Instantly comes rook c1, and now you are like, okay, if I play knight d7, this rook is opposite the queen and I don't like it anymore. So that's the reason why Prag first places his queen on b7. Again, a nice little move, f4, and he develops his knight. So black has finished his development, and if given a chance, he would like to play c5 with his queen defending the d5 pawn. So Prag has planned it very well. But Peter also has done nicely in the opening. He puts his bishop on h4, putting pressure here. The bishop also moves out of the pawn chain, which was limiting it. Rook comes to c8. a3 was played here. And now the plan is that white would want to play b4 and gain more space. And at this point, Prag was not very sure whether he should go c5 or not, because, somehow after, let's say, knight takes d7, it's not so simple which way to recapture. If you take with the queen, then f6, the pawns will be doubled, and if you take back with the knight, then maybe this d5 pawn is not too safe. It can come under pressure. Maybe I first need to defend e3, and this way white is slightly better. So he first goes a5, and only when Peter plays his pawn up to g4 does he decide that now I can actually break in the center with c5. Actually, I was wondering if Prag could have been a little greedy and taken a pawn, fe, knight g4. But I think what Prohaska had in mind is a move like rook c2, swinging the rook over to g2, or king h1 with the idea of playing rook g1 and putting pressure here. And Pragg did not like this in his favor, so he played c5. Bishop takes on f6, knight takes back, and now came the move g5. And now Pragg jumped in with his knight to e4. But this is where I think Prohaska and Pragnananda both calculated the same variation, but maybe missed a very critical bit of detail. So here, if you don't do anything as white, why have you sort of weakened your position so much? Because there's no real hope for an attack with the knight sitting very strong on e4. So clearly his idea was d takes on c5. And now this is your first question here. What do you play here as black? Black to play. So one idea is, of course, to take this with the knight, but then you lose your central pawn. So you don't want to do that. Okay. The other idea is to take this with your rook. Possible and a very, very fine decision, but after knight e4, d e4, maybe something like queen d7 or queen here, white is doing okay. I mean, white has no problems here. The other point could be to take here with the pawn, but actually now after queen d5, white is once again clearly better. So this is where Pragg's move was forced, and that was to take knight takes c3. Good job if you found this move. And now for Peter, I'm sure that he realized that, okay, if you take with the pawn here, then after bishop takes c5, his position is a complete mess. This is weak, this is weak, the knight is not very solid, can be kicked away later, c3 pawn is weak. He wouldn't enter such a position. Okay, if you take with the rook, then after b takes c5, I have very strong center control, and this knight will be attacked later via bishop d6. Again, doesn't look great at all. And similarly with queen takes c3, I take back with the pawn, and you are in trouble because queen takes a5. Even though this is a free pawn, I go bishop d6, and your king is not feeling so good in this position. Black is better. So now Pragg decides to push his pawn. Peter decides to push his pawn. And again, it's Pragg's move. What does he do here? So if you decide to move your queen, let's say queen c7, you are just losing after rook c3. White is just completely dominant here. So Pragg had thought of the move rook takes c6. And this is an important move. If you found this, well done. But the most important moment of the game comes here. White takes on c6. What do you do now? Black to play. And I think this was just phenomenal calculation by Pragg. Not just calculation, but even assessment. Again, taking here makes no sense. Rook takes and white is clearly in control. So the move here is the bone crushing rook takes e3. Very strong move. And Pragg had it all sort of figured out. Now the rook defends the knight, so you must take the rook. There's no other way. Like if you go back here, now I can, I could take here on c6, but then there is rook takes c3. So the better move here is bishop c5 first, creating this deadly discovered problems. And now if you go king h1, I can now take on c6, and black is doing very well here. Because there is this problem with d4 check coming in. Okay, so he took here, and now came bishop c5. Pinning. This does not work, very importantly, because I can take, and you cannot take back because of knight e2 check, and black wins. So he played here rook takes c3, bishop e3, rook e3, and queen takes c6. And we come to this position where black has a queen and a pawn against white's two rooks. And if you were to just assess this materially, you will realize that two rooks, 10 points, queen and pawn, 10 points. And generally, such a position should be completely fine for white. But it's only because these pawns are here that actually black is doing really well. If the pawns were back here, I would say that white is completely fine. Maybe could even fight for an advantage here. And that brings us to the important point in the dynamic of queen versus rook. Whenever you have the queen and the opponent's king is slightly weakened, the queen often becomes stronger than the two rooks, because it's looking at weaknesses. It's looking at this pawn, suddenly this pawn, there could be some kind of a pin, and there could be some kind of a double attack and all of this, and you will see that in ample measure. Like after rook d1, Pragg first pins this rook, queen c5, good move. King comes up, and now a very key move, h6. This gets rid of the back rank issues. And also after taking, I'm sure Pragg's idea was to just play g6 and then take this pawn later on with his king. So rook went to d2, and now he played queen c4. Again, a very small little move attacking this f4 pawn. So he went rook f3. If you go king up, then I go with my queen within, attack your rook coming from behind here. So rook f3, and now h5. The queen will use its pawns to create a mating attack, and this pawn will be very important because it controls the square, can move forward as well. So very, very good chess. And now Prohaska here sort of lost his cool. He felt like if Pragg gets g6, king g7, b5, Pragg is just slowly improving his position. I can't do much. My rook is tied down to this. Let me do something. And he sacrifices a pawn. But this is just a free pawn for Pragg. Now he's 2 pawns up. King g2. Queen comes to e4. And king f2. He comes up. Rook d3. Queen h1, he takes, and now this is what I meant. The queen can just keep on attacking. Check, check. Of course, you can't take here yet because then rook f2 would pin your queen. But he played queen f3 check, king g1, king g8. Nice little move. The king will be very safe on h7. Rook back check. Now the h pawn starts to roll. We had spoken about that h pawn, very dangerous pawn. And this is very easy now for Pragg. He creates 2 passers. The king is weak here. White has to be careful about a check coming in, which will drop some material. And at the same time, look at this. Pins here, moves forward. King comes up. King is safe. Again, pins here. Queen c4. Queen f1. And now h3. Pragg converts this very nicely, g4, and you will see that how the queen actually controls the h7 square. So there's no check here, and after this king is safe here, check, check, and this is over. Because if you go king h2, then g3 check is very powerful. Takes, queen takes is winning, and otherwise it's over. So at this point, Peter Prohaska resigned. And this was a very, very nice game by Praggnanandhaa. If you look at this entire calculation that began with knight takes c3, then rook takes c6 and rook takes e3, that was of course very impressive. But also the very fact that this position was assessed as being better for black by Pragg during the game shows his understanding and shows his level of play. I was very impressed with this game, and Pragg is playing chess at a very, very good level right now. Just to show you what are the standings like in the tournament right now, Pragg is in the lead with 5 out of 6. Amin Tabatabai is on 4 points. Then you have a mass of players on 3.5, then 2.5, 1.5, and so on. So Pragg clearly still doing very well. He is yet to face players like you can see here, he is going to face Elyanov, Matlakov, and Wojtaszek. So 3 very strong opponents yet to come for him. He is on 2707 right now. His rating performance is 2993, and we hope that Pragg manages to finish off this tournament really well. We are enjoying his games and wishing him the best. This is Sagar Shah signing off. Bye bye.